The golden dragon had not eaten in 3 weeks, and every expert who tried to tame her had failed in terror, until a weary father, a war veteran with nothing left but his daughter's hope, stepped through the gates of the celestial sanctuary. What happened next would test courage, grief, and the unbreakable bond between a child and a creature thought lost forever. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to the channel and like the video, and tell us in the comments where are you watching from. Now, let's jump into the story. The golden light of Titan's outer station gleamed against the transparent walls of the celestial sanctuary. Captain Rowan Hale walked slowly through the long glass corridor, his boots echoing on polished metal floors. He was no stranger to unusual missions, but this one was unlike any assignment he had ever faced. He had been summoned by urgent request. The keepers of the sanctuary had a problem no one could solve. A rare dragon, once radiant and admired across the galaxy, had fallen into silence and despair. Her name was Lysandra. The first thing the keepers told Rowan was that Lysandra had not eaten in 3 weeks. The second was that 36 professional tamers had already tried and failed to reach her. Some had been driven out in less than an hour. Many left injured or humiliated. Rowan listened calmly as the head caretaker, a tall figure named Malric, explained the situation. Malric's voice trembled despite the layers of protective gear he wore. She's completely unresponsive. She will not eat, will not sleep properly, and any approach only makes her retreat further. It's as if she's lost the will to exist. Through the reinforced window, Rowan saw her. The dragon rested in the far corner of a massive chamber. Her scales shifted between dull gold and tarnished copper under the artificial sun lamps. Her great body curled inward as though she wanted to vanish into herself. Even in her sorrow, she was magnificent. Malric continued speaking. His words hurried, as though each detail might warn Rowan away. She belonged to Queen Selene, the sovereign's wife. After the queen died in the hyperspace accident, Lysandra refused to respond to anyone. Lysandra was my wife's constant companion. She raised her from an egg. To end her life would be to erase the last living piece of Selene. I cannot bear that. But I also cannot watch her waste away. He looked directly at Rowan. I need someone to reach her. I'm offering 5 million credits and a place for you and your family on any core world you choose. I know your record. You are a father. You understand responsibility and resilience. I believe you may succeed where others have failed. Rowan remained silent for a long moment. In his mind, he pictured his daughter Ivy, waiting for him back in their modest quarters on the lower ring of the station. She was 9 years old, with bright eyes and endless curiosity. She deserved better than recycled air and processed meals. 5 million credits could change her future forever. But Rowan knew this would not be one with promises of wealth. It would take something deeper. Finally, he spoke. If I attempt this, if I will need to bring Ivy. Malric gasped in alarm. That is impossible. Absolutely not. The dragon is dangerous. She could kill without warning. Rowan shook his head. If I go alone, I am not your answer. Ivy has a gift. She understands creatures in a way even the most skilled specialists cannot. I trust her, and more importantly, Lysandra may trust her too. The room fell silent. Malric turned pale, but Sovereign Dorian's eyes narrowed in thought. He studied Rowan carefully, weighing the risk against the possibility of hope. After a long pause, Dorian said quietly, 1 hour. Prove to me you can last 1 hour inside her enclosure. If you survive, we will discuss your conditions further. Rowan considered. 1 hour would not make him rich, but Dorian added that even a consultation fee of 50,000 credits would be paid if Rowan endured. That alone could cover Ivy's school for a year. He looked once more at Lysandra. Her posture told him everything. She was not V. She was grieving. He recognized the same expression he had seen in countless soldiers broken by loss. "Very well," he said. "I will give you your hour, but I will do it my way." Malric began to protest, but Dorian raised a hand to silence him. The sovereign's gaze softened. "Perhaps it is time we try a different way." As Rowan prepared to enter the dragon's enclosure, the air grew tense. Every step carried the weight of suspense. The sanctuary keepers watched nervously from behind the reinforced glass, certain that another failure was about to unfold. But Rowan did not walk in as a soldier. He entered as a father who understood grief, carrying not weapons or instruments, but patience. He chose not to stand tall and confront the creature. Instead, he lowered himself to the ground, 20 feet away, and simply sat in silence. The challenge had begun, and somewhere in the shadows of the great chamber, Lysandra opened. The chamber doors closed with a heavy seal, and Captain Rowan Hale stood alone inside the vast enclosure. The air felt different here. It smelled faintly of ozone, as if storms had passed through. The ground beneath him shimmered with fine crystals, designed to absorb bursts of heat or energy. Lysandra, the golden dragon, lay curled against the far wall, her wings folded tight, her head resting heavily on the ground, her eyes dull and half-closed. She gave no sign of interest in the man who had just entered. Rowan did not move closer. Instead, he lowered himself onto the crystal sand about 20 feet away and crossed his legs. The silence was heavy, broken only by the quiet hum of the containment field above. Then Rowan reached into his coat and pulled out a small, weathered reading tablet. With a simple flick, a page lit up in soft glow. He began to read aloud. His voice was rough from years of shouting commands through helmets and comms, but as he settled into the rhythm, the words grew calm. The story was an old one from Earth, a tale of journeys, courage, and friendship. It was the same book he often read to Ivy before bed. He did not direct his words at the dragon. He read for himself, but his tone carried through the chamber. 10 minutes passed. Lysandra did not stir. 20 minutes passed. Her breathing, once shallow and uneven, began to slow into a steadier rhythm. 30 minutes. One of her massive eyes shifted, the vertical pupil narrowing slightly as it focused on Rowan. The watchers outside pressed closer to the glass, whispering among themselves. No one had ever lasted this long without being forced to retreat. Rowan kept reading. He did not flinch under her gaze. He did not raise his voice or lower it. He let the words flow, steady and unforced. At the 40-minute mark, Lysandra uncurled slightly, her head lifting just enough to rest her chin on the sand. It was not a sign of aggression. It was the posture of someone listening. Rowan noticed, but he did not celebrate. He simply turned another page and continued. When an hour had nearly passed, a sound broke the silence. It was not the piercing keening the keepers had described, the terrible cry that shattered audio dampeners. This sound was lower, softer, almost questioning. Rowan closed the tablet, marked the page, and stood slowly. He did not approach. He looked at the dragon once more, then turned toward the door. "Same time tomorrow," he said quietly, as though making an agreement. Outside the enclosure, Malric could hardly believe what he had witnessed. She looked at you," he stammered. "She's never done that before." Rowan only shrugged. She's not broken. She's hurting. There's a difference. Later that evening, in a private office overlooking the sanctuary, Sovereign Dorian invited Rowan to speak with him. The Emperor poured himself a drink. She actually responded to you. Rowan shook his head. She responded to the space I gave her. You don't force grief, you sit with it. Dorian studied him for a long moment. His voice was softer when he spoke again. You've lost someone too. Rowan nodded once. My wife, 3 years ago. The kind of illness no medicine could stop. I'm sorry, Dorian said. So am I, Rowan answered. But I had Ivy to think about. She kept me moving forward. He glanced out the window at the dragon's enclosure. Lysandra doesn't have that. She's trapped in silence, and everyone keeps poking at her as if she's a machine that can be repaired. That won't work. Dorian leaned against the glass, his expression unreadable. What will work? Rowan thought carefully before answering. She needs to be reminded that life still exists, that it's not betrayal to feel something other than sorrow. But I can't do this alone. I need Ivy. She has a gentleness I lost years ago. The Emperor hesitated. Allowing a child near a grieving dragon sounded reckless. Yet the look in Rowan's eyes was firm, steady, and without doubt. The next day, Ivy arrived with her father. Small and bright-eyed, she carried with her a case that seemed almost too big for her arms. Malric nearly collapsed from panic when he saw her step into the enclosure. This is madness, Malric whispered, his skin pale. But Dorian's voice came over the intercom. Let them proceed. Inside the chamber, Ivy stayed close to her father at first. She looked at the dragon with awe, her voice soft. She looks sad, Ivy said. She is sad, Rowan replied. Ivy considered for a moment, then opened her case. Inside was a small learning instrument, a child's version of a guitar. It was covered in stickers and scuffs. She settled it in her lap and began to play. The notes were uneven, clumsy, and far from perfect, but they were sincere. Lysandra's head snapped up. For the first time in 2 years, her eyes widened with sharp focus. She turned toward the child, nostrils flaring, wings twitching. Rowan tensed, ready to protect his daughter. But Lysandra did not attack. She listened. Ivy continued to strum, the little melody echoing through the chamber. After a moment, the dragon made a sound, deep and resonant. Not a roar, but something closer to harmony. Ivy's eyes lit up. She's singing with me, she whispered. Rowan's heart tightened. For the first time, he believed this broken creature might find her way back. Outside, the keepers watched in stunned silence. Sovereign Dorian sat forward, his breath catching. For 2 years, he had thought hope was gone. Now, as the dragon hummed in response to the child's music, he dared to believe again. The first contact had been made, and it changed everything. The days that followed grew into a quiet rhythm. Each morning, Captain Rowan Hale and his daughter Ivy walked into the massive chamber where Lysandra waited. The dragon no longer kept her head bowed to the ground. Instead, she lifted her eyes when they entered, watching carefully, as though expecting them. Rowan always brought his tablet and read stories aloud. Ivy always carried her small instrument and played, sometimes clumsy, sometimes off-key, but always with patience and heart. Together, they filled the once silent chamber with sound and presence. Lysandra began to respond in small ways. She shifted her wings, stretching them wide so the golden membranes caught the artificial sunlight. She rolled her massive body, shaking loose dust that had settled during weeks of stillness. And most surprising of all, she made soft humming notes that blended with Ivy's music. The keepers outside the glass whispered constantly. Never had they, but they could not deny that something had changed. In the evenings, Rowan was summoned often to meet with Sovereign Dorian. The Emperor no longer carried the posture of pure authority. Instead, he spoke as a man who had known deep loss. He asked questions about Ivy, about how children saw the world differently, about how grief looked through younger eyes. During one such meeting, Dorian stared at an old portrait of his late wife Celine. She stood beside Lysandra, both of them captured in laughter. Dorian's voice was low when he spoke. Celine was a musician. Before she became queen, she played for the Galactic Symphony. Every night she would play for Lysandra until the dragon slept. When she died, Lysandra lost not only her rider, but her music. Rowan listened and understood. Ivy's songs remind her. It's not the same, but it reaches her because it's honest. Dorian nodded slowly. Grief makes us forget the good parts. Maybe your daughter has given her back a piece of what was lost. The bond deepened as days passed. On the 8th morning, something extraordinary happened. Ivy strummed a tune she had been practicing, and Lysandra rose to her feet. The ground trembled under her weight. Rowan instinctively moved in front of his daughter, ready to shield her. But Ivy stepped forward with calm courage. The dragon lowered her massive head until her golden eye was level with the child. Her breath stirred Ivy's hair, warm and steady. Ivy smiled and said softly, "Hello, friend. Do you want to hear a new song?" Lysandra made a low rumble that vibrated through the entire chamber. Ivy sat down on the sand and began to play. Though the melody was full of small mistakes, the dragon listened with focus, and when the last note faded, she pressed her snout gently against Ivy's shoulder. Rowan's throat tightened. He recognized the gesture for what it was. Gratitude. Trust. Outside. ... The keepers gasped in disbelief. One of them whispered, "She has chosen them." That evening, Rowan and Ivy were invited to a private dinner with Dorian. It was not a formal banquet, but a simple meal in the Emperor's quarters. The room was lined with books and filled with photographs of Celine. Ivy studied the images and said with childlike honesty, "She was beautiful." Dorian smiled faintly. She was, and she loved fiercely. She believed children understood dragons best because they had not yet learned to be afraid of wonder. They ate together, speaking of music, of service, of dreams. Ivy declared she wanted to be a caretaker of space creatures, or maybe a pilot, or maybe both. Dorian listened with genuine interest, his eyes softening each time she spoke. After the meal, Dorian pulled Rowan aside. His voice was quiet but steady. Lysandra ate today, the first proper meal in 3 weeks. She took food from the feeding tube willingly. It is because of you and your daughter. Rowan nodded. It's a start. Dorian placed a hand on his shoulder. More than a start. It is hope. Something I thought I had lost. For a brief time, peace seemed possible. The bond between father, daughter, and dragon grew stronger with each day. Ivy's laughter echoed in the chamber, and Lysandra followed her movements with careful eyes. Rowan read through entire chapters, and the dragon listened as though the stories belonged to her. But peace rarely lasts unchallenged. One morning, Rowan and Ivy arrived at the sanctuary to find chaos. Alarms blared across the corridors. Keepers ran in every direction, voices raised in panic. Malric's face was pale as he approached them. "She's gone," he said, nearly choking on the words. Lysandra broke through the containment field during the night. She escaped into the station. No one knows where she is. Ivy gripped her father's hand tightly. But she wouldn't hurt anyone, she said. Rowan agreed. She's not dangerous. She's... Still, security teams flooded the station, searching every level. Weapons were drawn, though none dared to fire unless ordered. Sovereign Dorian stood among them, his expression torn between fear and sorrow. Rowan closed his eyes and thought, where would Lysandra go? Where does grief take someone when the weight feels unbearable? Then he remembered his own nights of despair, when the silence of his apartment walls closed in. He would always walk to the observation deck, looking at the stars, searching for meaning. He opened his eyes. The observation dome, level 94, she'll be there. Without hesitation, he pulled Ivy with him and set off through the corridors. The bonds they had built with the dragon were strong, but now those bonds would be tested in the open. And this time, the entire station was watching. The observation dome stretched high above, its curved glass offering an endless view of the galaxy. From here, the stars painted the black sky in shimmering patterns, and distant clouds of red and violet gas glowed like brushstrokes across the heavens. It was a place meant for reflection, for remembering what lay beyond human reach. And there, pressed against the wide glass window, was Lysandra, the golden dragon's wings folded around her body, her great form trembling with sorrow. Her head rested low, and a deep sound rose from her throat, a mournful hum that echoed through the dome like a lament to the universe. Rowan and Ivy arrived to find security forces already gathered in a tense circle. Weapons were drawn, though not aimed. The keepers argued about containment protocols, their voices rising in fear. Sovereign Dorian stood nearby in his plain robes, looking more like a grieving man than an emperor. Rowan raised his hand. "Everyone, back away," he said firmly. "You're frightening her." "She's not a threat. She's mourning," the chief of security protested. "We can't leave her like this. She could lash out." Rowan's voice hardened. "She doesn't need guns. She needs understanding." He turned to Dorian, meeting his eyes. "Trust me." Dorian hesitated, then gave a small nod. "Clear the room." Slowly, the guards lowered their weapons and withdrew, leaving only the Emperor, Rowan, Ivy, and the dragon beneath the dome of stars. Ivy stepped forward, clutching her small instrument close to her chest. She walked carefully until she was only a few steps from Lysandra. The dragon's golden eye shifted to focus on the child, its surface reflecting the starlight. Ivy sat down on the floor, resting the little guitar on her lap. Her fingers strummed uncertainly at first, searching for a melody. She didn't play one of her practice songs. Instead, she created something new, a soft tune filled with both sadness and comfort. The music floated through the dome, simple, imperfect, but honest. Lysandra's keening stopped. Her breathing slowed. She turned her head to listen fully, her great body shifting as if drawn to the fragile sound. Ivy spoke softly while her fingers kept moving. "It's okay to be sad," she said. "I miss my mom every day. Daddy says the missing never goes away, but you learn to carry it. Like a backpack that feels heavy at first, but gets lighter as you keep walking." The dragon let out a low rumble, deep and aching, as though she understood. Ivy's voice did not waver. "But Mom wouldn't want me to stop living. She would want me to laugh sometimes, and eat cake, and play songs, even if I play them badly. She would want me to love life, even when I'm sad." Rowan stood silently behind his daughter, his chest tight. He knew Ivy was not only speaking to Lysandra, but to herself, reminding her own heart of truths that were too big for her years. The Emperor stepped forward slowly, his face pale but determined. "Lysandra," he said softly, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I thought keeping you here was protecting you, but I see now it was only keeping you alone. I didn't know how to help you because I didn't know how to help myself." The dragon's eye turned toward him. Dorian raised a trembling hand and reached out, stopping just short of her scaled snout. After a long pause, Lysandra leaned into his touch. The hum she made shook the air, but it was no longer sorrowful. It was acceptance. Ivy's song shifted, the notes weaving into something brighter. Dorian's eyes widened suddenly. "That melody," he whispered. "It sounds like one of Celine's compositions. She played it at our wedding. She called it Stars and Promises." Ivy blinked in surprise. "I just made it up. It felt right." Rowan knelt beside her. "Play it again." She strummed the melody, and to everyone's surprise, he began to hum as well. His voice carried the memory of words written long ago by his wife. Rowan, rough and untrained, joined them, his deep voice weaving into the harmony. For a moment, they were four souls bound not by loss, but by connection. Father, daughter, and emperor, finding peace together beneath the stars. They stayed there until the station's artificial dawn began to rise, the galaxy's colors slowly fading against the light. When they finally left, there was no fear, only calm. 3 months later, the celestial sanctuary opened its gates to the public for the first time in years. Visitors from across the empire filled the great dome to witness Lysandra's return. She soared through the air with radiant strength, her golden scales catching the lights, her wings slicing through the sky in breathtaking arcs. But the most powerful moment came when Ivy walked onto the stage with a new guitar, a real one, gifted to her by Dorian. She played the same melody she had once created in sorrow, and Lysandra circled above, her voice harmonizing in a sound that shook every heart in the sanctuary. The audience stood in awe, not only of the dragon's beauty, but of the bond that had brought her back. Rowan watched from the side, pride in his eyes. Dorian stood beside him, no longer the shadow of grief he had once been, but a man who carried memory with strength. And Ivy, small but unshaken, smiled as she played. Her song carried through the air like a promise that even in the darkest grief, there can be light, and even broken hearts can sing again. The story of a father, a daughter, a dragon, and an emperor would be remembered not as one of despair, but as one of hope, healing, and the endless power of connection under the stars.